Fight!
Hello Acolytes! Welcome to the Cleric Corner. My name is Riker, and here we talk about all things Dungeons & Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds more unique and stories more impactful. Fighters are arguably the most popular class in Dungeons & Dragons, at least to the point that more fighters are played than any other class, which is weird because you'd think that this would then be the most requested class, but here we are towards the end of our Better Class series, and we'll leave it on a high note. But according to the player's handbook, fighters are the wielders of many different weapons and take the form of soldiers and knights. But perhaps you think that these archetypes are a little overused, and wish to add a little bit more flair to your next fighter character. What if your fighter was a sport athlete or got their strength from a god? I'll be going over 10 unique fighter concepts to try to subvert what our idea is about the fighter. Let's get our second win and surge towards some new ideas. Like and subscribe to stay alerted for new videos and help the ever unforgiving YouTube algorithm. But to show you what I mean, let's talk about a fighter who's thrown many punches in his life but has never hit a soul. With the Playwright fighter, he's been in many plays and performances that reenact or depicted wars and battles. These live shows to entertain the public are choreographed and practiced. When the fighter throws a punch, he hits his own hand to make a slapping sound, fooling the audience, of course, to seem like he punched the other person. All you theater kids will know exactly what I mean. They take their memorized footwork and apply it where they can. Their second wind in this case, an intermission, and their action surge in encore. And these are also your LARPers who've practiced and played the sword for so long that they're so excited to finally get out and experience the real thing. And maybe for some of these entertainers, there might be a few things that held them back physically from going out and experiencing the world, whether it be a missing arm or a missing leg. Characters with physical disabilities can be endearing and inspiring to other characters. The disabled fighter goes out adventuring just because they were told that they couldn't. But the roleplay elements of a fighter embracing, even overcoming, and seeing the disabilities as strengths is something that I would enjoy seeing at more tables. Or it could be a disabled war vet that's forced back into fighting because of a war or an alien invasion. Perhaps they're even mute, blind, or deaf. And where you might have disadvantage with perception with your eyesight, you might have advantage with perception with your smell. But whatever your disability is, you're out to prove your worth without it. It's your daredevil character, if you will. But let's say the disability isn't physical, but within magic, where possibly your whole life you've wanted to be a wizard, but your birth abnormality keeps you from casting magic. And because of that impossibility, you have to make up for that lack of power in your fighting. And you kind of get to experience that wizards are stronger than fighters in a very meta way. But what if instead of using these disabilities to their advantage, they often strive to replace that disability to make them normal through magic or future tech or by symbiote? And weirdly, my mind goes to the movie Ratatouille, where Linguini was only the greatest chef ever because someone else was pulling the strings. I'll let you figure out who or what might be the entity pulling those strings. But speaking of another hero with physical disability, they sought out science to make up for it. With the super soldier fighter, they are enhanced beyond what a normal human can do. Definitely not your average guard or townsperson with a pitchfork, but with super intelligent artificers like Iron Man and incredible sorcerers like Doctor Strange, the fighter has to have something in order to compete. Or they could have other modifications or mutations in other ways, like somehow they can't feel pain or they have developed thicker skin. There's a ton of mutations that your fighter can obtain through genetic mutations or by science experiment. And some might argue that you don't need powers to be super, so live out your vigilante dreams and be a Batman-esque type character. In the real world, obviously there is not mutants or super soldier serum, but people still try a number of things to improve their bodies. So with the Stimulant fighter, they look elsewhere for other performance aids. They may have a bag of smelling salts to induce adrenaline, or some less legal performance-enhancing drugs. Creatine, steroids, or actual adrenaline, or whatever the magical equivalent is in your world. There's a plethora of options in magical fauna and fungi. But other methods as well have proved useful in bodily improvements, meditation or hypnosis being big ones. Perhaps your fighter puts themselves to sleep and let their body take over. But you can't talk about stimulants without talking about the place where they're regularly used, not just in the fighting ring, but also in sports. So next we'll look at the Olympian fighter. more. Those that competed in sports for entertainment instead of the stage like your Playwright. Professionals in the world of shot put, fencing, archery, and javelin throwing. Competitors that are in such peak physical condition that they have no issue translating their sport into their fighting styles. I mean, go crazy. Perhaps your soccer player or skater puts knives on their feet, or the tennis player sets up a serve to slash the enemy with a sword instead of a tennis racket. A hockey player adopts a fighting style where they're sweeping the legs. Just remember that your fighter didn't always have to be a fighter, but was possibly forced into it. So their style is very reminiscent of the occupation that they had beforehand. Now, I'll take a break here and say that even though a lot of these class concepts are just for reflavoring, I have made multiple subclasses on some of the archetypes we've discussed, posted in my Discord. However, going forward, in the effort of funding better content for you guys, I'll be taking them and putting them on my new website. Selling some of my creative energy there and getting a few cents back will really help in the direction that I want to take this channel. But of course, my patrons who have supported me in so many other ways will still be getting them for free. I have been so grateful for all of your guys' support, and I hope that this can take us to the next level, and that it's only because of you that I've gotten to this point. So I really look forward to what we can create together. Link in the description. But going on, there is a huge media archetype that I really want to talk about. And you're probably familiar with it, although you probably haven't heard the term before. The archetype being someone from this real world somehow finding themselves in a world that's more magical and mystical. We call them the Isekai. And examples of this would be Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland, The Matrix, Chronicles of Narnia, Santa Claus, or Space Jam. The Isekai is you, somehow falling in between realities or down a rabbit hole and finding yourself in a world with more dragons and more dungeons. And once you've entered the land, you may already know a little bit about it, but didn't think that it actually existed. Like, you know about Looney Tunes, but you'd never expect to be in a world with them. Or you could just be completely unfamiliar with it and you have to learn as you go. Either way, you have to learn quickly to survive, so you pick up a sword and join the first adventuring group that you lay eyes on. And fun fact, the original Dungeons and Dragons animated series was just a bunch of isekai characters. But speaking of popular TV tropes, let's look at our favorite investigator, Sherlock Holmes. But specifically for this example, we'll be using the Robert Downey Jr. version. In the film, his super intelligence, or more of super perception, allows him insight into the fight to know exactly what moves his opponent will have and where his opponent will be. Because sometimes it's not just about hitting your enemies hard. Fighting is just as much of a mental game as it is a physical one. It's about convincing your opponent that you are going to win even before the fight has even started, inserting that seed of doubt to make them hesitate when it counts. This fighter is full of sarcastic quips, insults, and humor that lowers your opponent's guard and pulls their focus just long enough for you to strike, because they know how to manipulate their opponent with their fist and with their mouth. But perhaps being able to predict what your opponent will do may be you peering into the future for a couple of seconds. Perhaps your fighting styles are more magical than you give it credit for. With the Somatic fighter, your second wind is basically like a false life spell that you cast on yourself. Your action surge, a little haste spell, and your improved critical, a hex. Or your action surge and second wind is more of a time magic, where you rewind time to heal wounds, or you slow time down enough to get 2 attacks in one round. This leads to many fighter subclasses who are already primed for magic. Now let's pull some inspiration from your fighter character outside of the medieval time period. Add some color and diversity in your fighter with the Culturalist. Throughout history, we've had many flavors of fighters, and it's about picking and choosing and pulling inspiration from them. We already have the Samurai Warrior archetype, of course, but what if your fighter was more of a Native American warrior? Or pirates, cowboys, ancient Koa warriors, even Spartans, Vikings, and so much more. You could even pull inspiration from mythos and history with Genghis Khan, Hercules, Beowulf, Attila the Hun, Achilles, Vlad the Impaler, Spartacus, Julius Caesar, just to name a few. You could have been one of these great warriors or trained by one. You could have been their squire before they died or mysteriously disappeared. Or you could have just been trained by the ghost of one of these characters, specially chosen to finish off what your master had started so many years previous. Now, it's also important to mention that some of those fighters listed actually got their power from gods. Perhaps your fighter was not endowed by science or magic, but by a god themselves. The endowed fighters are given strength and tactics of the gods, specifically perhaps the god of war. The mythos of ancient Greece were full of these, full of gods among men. You could get your power from Ares or Zeus, Or in D&D mythos, you could get it from Tempest, Lord of Battles, or Cord the Stormlord. These gods, of course, not giving you powers like a cleric or a paladin, but literally imbuing your body with godlike strength, almost downloading battle tactics like the Matrix. You could reflexively catch a punch and break their arm instinctually as you're still getting used to your new power. Now, you could be the chosen one of these gods, of course, but why not make it a little funner and you be number 2? Because they had given all of these powers to someone else and they failed and you were the second pick. You were the backup. But the fighter class is very versatile in what you can do. A clean slate as you pick up a sword and become something great. If you've had other ideas while watching this video on how you would reflavor the fighter, or wish to share a fighter that you've played, add them to the comments below. And stick around next time as we'll be going over a special feature class, the Blood Hunter. Due to the many comments who asked for me to do it, I will be glad to share some fun new ideas. But in the meantime, go out there and spread the good word of D&D and make the world a better place, both on and off your tables. See you in the next one.
Finish him. Fatality.